If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedman.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is Bill Stainton, a Hall of Fame keynote speaker on innovation, creativity, and breakthrough thinking, an author and the creator of the Turning Creativity into Money Executive Leadership Program. Before all of that, he was the executive producer of the longest-running and highest-rating local comedy TV show in the United States, where he won an astonishing 29 Emmy Awards as a producer, writer, and performer. Bill's been cited by Forbes and the Wall Street Journal and was a regular columnist for the Seattle Business Magazine. He's also a musician, scuba diver, and pilot, although rarely at the same time. All in all, he's an amazing guy and one of my all-time National Speakers Association colleagues. Bill, what an absolute pleasure it is to welcome you to the show, and thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Oh, you're very welcome, Susan. It's such a blast to be here and wonderful to be talking with you again.
Bill, creativity, turning creativity into money, what a great subject.
Thanks.
What I find out from many of my authors is that they say they're not creative. Talk to me about the fact that when people say that to you, how do you respond?
Well, first of all, it's funny to hear that your authors might have that feeling that they're not creative because they've written a book, in some cases, multiple books. That's an act of creation. That's an act of creativity. Whether the book came quickly and easily to them or whether they struggled through it, it doesn't matter. That's an act of creativity. But you're absolutely right. Most people, if you ask them, they'll say, oh, well, I'm not one of the creative types. That's the other people. Because we think that creativity means that you're a dancer or a comedian or a musician or an artist of some sort. That's just simply not the case. There was a study done some years ago to try and find out if there's, what's the difference between creative people and non-creative people. What these people did was they surveyed a bunch of creative people. Now, who would these be? Well, again, artists, dancers, poets, musicians, people like that. And they asked them all kinds of questions. Did you have a pet growing up? Did your parents play music in the house? Did you play outdoors? And, all sorts of things. And then they got a bunch of non-creative people. Usually when I ask my audiences about this, they always say accountants, librarians, people like that. And they ask them the same question. And again, the idea was to try and figure out, is there anything that separates the creative people from the non-creative people? And they found one thing, Susan, and one thing only, and it was this. The creative people believed that they were creative. That's the only difference. They believed they were creative, and therefore they went through life differently. They created literally a different universe than most of us go through. Most of us kind of plod through life, do-de-do-de-do, and we miss all these opportunities for creativity. They're out there. They're all over the place. It's just that the people who see themselves as creative are more attuned to that. That's available to any one of us. Any one of us can learn to be more creative. It's not difficult. In fact, we used to do it quite naturally. Yeah, I think anybody can be creative, and certainly any of your listeners who have gone through the process of writing a book, they should never, ever, ever say that they are not creative. They've done one of the most remarkable feats of creativity that there is. They've written a book.
Well, that was a fantastic response. I hate to think if I ask you a long question.
I'll give you shorter answers then.
No, I love it. That was a fantastic study to know that it's just a mindset of just thinking that you're creative or not thinking that you're creative that makes you that way. I know that before we came on the air, we started talking about the whole idea of creativity versus innovation. Talk to us about the difference between those two.
Basically, innovation is applied creativity. I define innovation as turning creativity into money. Creativity is coming up with the ideas. Innovation is turning them into something of value. For example, writing a book, that's an act of creativity. Marketing a book and selling a book, that's the innovation part. You can have all kinds of ideas, but until you actually create something of value, for example, a book, then the creative ideas are kind of worthless. What I say sometimes is, in and of itself, creativity is worthless. Innovation is priceless. We can all come up with lots of ideas, but if we don't do anything with them, then they have no worth. But we do something with them, like put them on a page or several pages and make a book out of it, and then bring that book to market. That creates value. It creates value certainly for the author if the book sells, and creates value for the reader, assuming that the book has any innate value in it to begin with.
When we start thinking about the idea of innovation, and I love that yes, you said people are very creative, they're authors, they've written this book, but as you rightly say, unless they market it, then it doesn't have the same value and you can't turn it into money. Where does somebody start when it comes to innovation? I'm thinking of it differently in terms of marketing. So talk to us about where you would start in the innovation process.
Well, I think the first thing is to understand what creativity and innovation are really all about. Because what I find is that people have this misconception. They think that creativity and innovation are all about like the lightning bolt that comes down and it only strikes the gifted few, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and people like that. That's not how it works. The truth is that we are all the gifted few, because creativity and innovation, they are not about the lightning bolt. They're really all about connecting dots. And what I mean by that is seeing two or more different things and connecting them in a way that nobody else ever has before. And these dots can be anything: ideas, experiences, people, every podcast you listen to, every book you read, every conversation you have with somebody. Those are all dots. Those are all things that you can collect, that you can then connect. So you collect and then connect to one another to find new ideas and new ways of looking at things. So the first thing to do is to start opening yourself up to these new ideas. Listen to a podcast that you wouldn't normally listen to. Read an article that you wouldn't normally read. Have a conversation with someone that you wouldn't normally talk to. As you're doing that, take it one step further and think, okay, how can I apply this, whatever this is, the podcast, the article, the conversation? How can I apply this to my world or to what I'm working on right now? When you start just asking that simple question, your brain will start coming up with answers. That's what it looks like inside the brain of a creative thinker, a breakthrough thinker, an innovative thinker. They look for the connections, because the connections are there if you look for them. Most of us never look for them. That's the problem.
I remember years ago, I used to go into doctors' offices and do exactly that, read a magazine that I wouldn't normally have read. Something on golfing, let's say.
Right, because that's all the doctor's offices have is magazines that nobody would normally read.
They probably get them free.
I'm sure they do. Some surplus warehouse someplace.
But that is so true, that going in, reading something that you wouldn't necessarily read and see what they do in that industry. And then I would take it, and this was when I was doing trade show work, and apply it to the training programs that I created. And I thought that was such a neat idea. And you're right. It just reminded me, wow, yes, let's look in other places to find these ideas. Because if you just look at book marketing, author marketing, it tends to be a little myopic. But you look at how other people are marketing other products or services and then bring that into this environment, you can definitely find some innovative ways to do.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there, Susan. If all you're doing is looking at how other authors have marketed their books, then you're probably going to come up with the same solutions that they've come up with. But there's nothing really creative there. So you're all going to have the same marketing ideas, and there's going to be this sense of sameness. And that's not going to make you stand out. As an author, you need to stand out. We know that. We know that people tend to buy books based on the cover. Okay, the cover's got to stand out. So it's got to be different. The marketing should be different also. And you're right, you're not going to find different ways to market a book by looking at how every other author who has ever existed has marketed a book. That's just going to tell you more of the same. But you look at other industries that have nothing whatsoever to do with book publication and book marketing. Okay, how did they market this? Oh, that's interesting. How is McDonald's marketing? How is United Airlines marketing? How can I apply that? Not can I apply it, but how can I apply what they're doing to my book, to how to market my book?
And that is a great segue into, I know that you've got a treasure map of questions to unlock great ideas. That is one of them, isn't it? How can I help make that work? What are some of the other ones?
That's really the core one, is looking outside your world and saying, how can I apply this to my world? So creativity is all about asking different questions, because it's all about getting your brain to look at a situation differently than you normally would. Any kind of question that will force you to look at a situation differently is a good one, because you never know what you're going to come up with. Let's stick with book marketing, of course. If you ask yourself questions like, say you've got a brand new book, it's either just been published or you're about to publish it, and you think, okay, how can I market this? What if you ask yourself questions like, how can I market this if I only had $100 to spend? How would a 70-year-old market this? How would an 80-year-old market this? How would a comedian market this? How would an astronaut market this? The question almost doesn't matter, but as long as you get your brain thinking, and here's one of the keys. You may not come up with what you think of as are good ideas at first. You say like, okay, how would an astronaut market my book? You think, okay, I'm coming up with stupid ideas. Don't discount the stupid ideas, because you never know which idea might be what I call the idea that leads to the idea. You come up with an idea that you think, oh, well, that's not feasible or that's stupid or whatever. Don't let it go yet. Play with it a little bit and play with it with some of your colleagues, some of your friends. If you're in a mastermind group, if you're in something like that, play with it, because somebody might say, oh, yeah, you're right. That is a stupid idea. But what if you take that idea, that stupid idea, and give it this little twist? Then you might, that's good. Now we're on to something. Now we've got $1 million idea that we never would have had if you hadn't had that stupid idea to begin with. Just ask yourself those questions and let your brain just go wild. Because again, you never know which dot is going to be the one that's going to complete the puzzle.
And I think you said something earlier, and that is, don't discount those ideas. We're very quick, I think, in editing those ideas and saying, oh, that's stupid. That's not going to work. Or
Right.
If somebody else says to you, oh, that's stupid or not going to work, and you believe them.
Yeah. And we do believe. Well, it's kind of like the difference between writing the first draft of a book and writing the final draft of the book. Ideally, when you're writing the first draft of the book, you're not going to be editing at the same time. Unfortunately, a lot of us do. And that's why it takes forever to write a book, because you spend 4 days writing the first sentence. Should I begin it with the or an? Oh, gosh, I don't know. Just get the words on paper. Just let the ideas flow, and then go back and give it your critical thinking and your evaluation and your judgment and that sort of thing. It's the same thing with coming up with creative ideas. Ask yourself the questions that'll get your brain thinking differently, and just let the ideas flow, just like a first draft of a book. You just get the words on paper. You just get the ideas on paper. And by the way, I recommend that you do it with actual paper, with a pad of paper. There's just something about the way the neurons fire when it's an actual physical activity. You just let them flow without going into editing mode. There's time for that later. So
And I've heard that before about actually physically writing. And I get frustrated with that. And I feel sometimes that I write better when I'm actually typing. And I usually start off, if I'm just doing any writing exercise, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, what shall I write about? And so I literally type that up. What should I write about?
Right.
I have no idea. But if I did have an idea, what would it be? And then I look out of the window and I see a bird on the bird feeder, and I say, oh, that's a pretty bird. And then one thought, that whole stream of consciousness goes into all sorts of things, and it's amazing what comes out. And I was like, I never thought about writing about that when I actually sat down to write.
I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, because, they're authors and writers, have had this experience. They think, oh, well, I'll write when inspiration strikes. Well, if you're depending on your writing to make a living, you're going to starve if you're going to wait for inspiration, because that's the equation's backwards. You don't wait for inspiration and then start writing. You start writing and the inspiration comes from that. Just like you just said, you just start writing. What should I write about? I don't know. Well, if I did know, what a great question that is, by the way. Well, if I did know, what would I write about? Oh, look, there's a bird out there. And you just start writing, and it's just that taking action and just starting. And all of a sudden, something will come from that. Not every single time, but it's far more likely to come from the act of writing than if you're just waiting for inspiration, because you may be waiting an awful long time.
I know that muse has a lot of places to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Waiting for it to come visit, It's a bit like Father Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know he only comes once a year. So
yes, exactly. Our listeners love hearing about mistakes. What are some of the big mistakes that you see people making? And I think we've alluded to some, but are there more that we need to know about?
Oh, there's never a shortage of mistakes, is there, Susan? The biggest mistake we have alluded to, the biggest mistake is thinking that I'm not creative. Or if it's not a big innovation, it doesn't count. If I'm not inventing the iPhone or the Tesla or the internet, it doesn't count. Innovation really is just about solving a problem. How can I make this better? And problems come in all sizes and shapes, and therefore innovations come in all sizes and shapes. Any one of us is an innovator. Every time we come up against a brick wall in our life, maybe it's a small one, maybe it's a big one, but just something that just bugs us. Most of us stop there and we whine and complain, and that's it. The creative person, the innovative person, the breakthrough thinker has the exact same experience. They come up against the brick wall, something bugs them, but they take it one step further. They say, ooh, how can I make this better? That's really all it is. Now, can you ask that question? Of course you can. How can I make this better? And your brain will start trying to come up with answers. We talked about it in the very beginning. It really is all about a mindset. If you just have that mindset that you are a creative person, you are a creative writer, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, it's an act of creation. That really is the biggest mistake, of just not believing that we've got that creativity. I know one of your previous guests talked about imposter syndrome. And it's the same thing. It's not true. It's not based in reality. It's a mindset that we have, and we have control over it. We can choose. That's one of the greatest gifts that we have. We can choose how we want to look at things. Why not choose a way that serves us?
Yeah, it's funny because I did a presentation this afternoon, definitely talking about the whole idea of the imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to believing that you're an expert in an area. And as you know, I look at helping authors go from unknown to expert authority in their niche market. Mm-hmm. And the idea of just saying I'm an expert, people just shy away from it and no, I feel like a phony. That's not the truth. They don't even like using the word. Now, expertise, they feel more comfortable with, but the word expert, they don't. Yes.
Interesting. Why do you think that is? That they're comfortable with expertise, but not expert, is because they don't want to put that label on themselves, or expertise seems softer somehow, or?
Yes, I think it's a softer sound, and there's this element of maybe they don't really feel as if they are the expert in a subject matter, but they do have expertise. So it's softer. It's definitely softer, right, but more palatable for them. So yeah, it's just interesting again, how the mind works and how we think and believe things about ourselves.
I love what you just said. They think that, well, if they're not the expert, that's another fallacy. You asked about mistakes, and it goes into the imposter syndrome thing as well. But so many times we feel like if we're not the expert, then we're not an expert. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. Okay, so if I can't be Einstein, then I guess I can't be a physicist. If I can't be Vladimir Horowitz, I guess I can't be a pianist. Well, that's ridiculous. Look, if you've written a book about something, you've got a certain amount of expertise. You can call yourself an expert because you know more than most people about it. Are you the absolute world-renowned expert in it? I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But the point is, you don't have to be. If that were the bar for everything, if you couldn't be an airline pilot unless you were the absolute best airline pilot in the world, it'd be really tough for us to get anywhere. If you couldn't be a surgeon unless you were the very best in the world, well, then we'd only have one surgeon with a long waiting line.
Very long. Yeah. Lining up with that Muse and Father Christmas as well.
Right. And this goes to people who are even aspiring to write a book, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you've run into this, Susan, because these are your clients who think, well, I mean, who am I to write a book about this? I mean, first of all, better books have already been written by people who are real experts. Those people, they're the same as you, and they probably went through the same doubts. Who am I to write this book? Well, you're you, and you write the book, you get your thoughts down on paper. And again, you turn creativity into money. You create something of value because people are going to find value in your words. So
people say things in different ways. And what is it? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. I mean, I've heard umpteen things about sales or creating online courses. There's just one person, for instance, that I think, oh, wow, yes, that makes sense to me. And let me follow that person's advice.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because, yes, you may be writing about a topic that dozens of other people have written about, but nobody's written it in your voice yet. Nobody's written it from your point of view yet. And your point of view may not be everybody's cup of tea. But for those for whom it is, you're their person. You're their expert. And they're waiting for you.
Yeah, good. Hope they're all lining up. Yeah. Bill, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you and what you do and how you might be able to help them with some innovations, especially when it comes to marketing their book, how can they find out more about you?
Well, the best way, of course, is my website. No surprise there, which is billstainton.com. That's BILLSTAINTON. And if they want to jumpstart their innovation, I've got a free download for them. For anybody listening to this podcast, just go to billstainton.com/Susan. See what I did there? In honor of Susan, I named it after Susan. And that'll give you it's basically a cheat sheet for instant innovation. If you're looking for innovative ideas quickly, it's a whole cheat sheet full of ways. And we talked about some of them already today, but I've got others as well, of ways that you can come up with those great ideas. And earlier we talked about questions. Well, I've got a page full of questions that'll jumpstart your creativity, jumpstart your own innovative smarts. So again, you can get that at billstainton.com/Susan.
Excellent. I love it. I love the fact that you've put the @Susan.com or /Susan. I'll put it in the show notes and get it right.
I trust you.
Bill, if you could leave our listeners with a golden nugget, I know you've given us so many nuggets already, but I'm just going to squeeze you for one more. What would it be? Your biggest and your best.
I think the biggest and the best is to actively seek out different colored dots with which to make those connections. Actively. Here's your assignment. Sometime this week, I want you to find an article online or find a magazine on the newsstand or find a podcast about a topic about which you have no interest whatsoever. No interest. You would never read this. In 1,000 years, you would never read this or listen to this. And read it or listen to it. And as you're doing it, ask yourself this question: how can I apply this to marketing my book? And then sit down with a piece of paper and force your brain to come up with at least 5 answers to that. And I promise you, you can do it. I promise you. The answers might sound stupid, but start to make this a habit. How can I apply this to marketing my book? And then let your brain get to work on it, because your brain will try to answer any question you put to it. If you give it better questions, you're going to get better answers.
That's dynamite. You really did save the best for last. Bill, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom because it was priceless. And thank you all for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparked some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.